In brief, we have Mary Reynolds, long-time inspirational activist and founder of We Are the Ark, which is doing so much to protect and restore habitats. We have Minister Pippa Hackett, who is both an organic farmer and the Minister of State for Land Use and Biodiversity. We have biologist and ecologist Dr. Catherine Farrell, who's a founding member of the Irish Forum on Natural Capital, and agricultural scientist Marina Conway, who is the CEO of Western Forestry Co. And those are very, very slight introductions for these four women who have amazing backgrounds and in-depth knowledge in all their subjects. So I'm just going to focus a couple of questions to each of them. Minister Pippa Hackett.
You get it first. Bang.
So they had time to make friends with each other, so bear that in mind when the fists go out. Minister, in these unprecedented times for nature, it seems to me there are two places that we simultaneously need to stand, which is both very close to nature, an intimate connection to her, so we can see exactly how she's unraveling, and also very far back from human culture, so we can get an overview and see the forces at work on society which are fueling and perpetuating the climate and biodiversity crises. So I'd like to do that with you slightly now, and first to draw close to the nature around your organic farm in Wicklow, and then to stand back a bit. So if we just think of home and think of Wicklow and that area, how's the soil? How's the water? How are the pollinators? How's the ash dieback? How are the birds? How are this year's swallows? When you think of that place, what are you aware of? What's there? What's missing?
I suppose firstly, my farm's in Offaly, so not in Wicklow. So the one in Wicklow I can't speak to, but certainly I can speak to the one in... So actually probably quite different landscapes in one sense, even between Wicklow and Offaly. I suppose actually on my own farm it's been interesting because my husband has been hosting a Twitter feed this week called Ireland's Farmers, and it can have an array of different farmer types, different enterprises on, and we've been doing it this week, so it's actually very much been interesting to hone in to come up with the material for it, and you know, he does a few videos and I have videos from the past, and we've just been going through our phones really to come up with the information and content, and it's just been really interesting because we've seen a bit of a pattern, and we converted to organic farming about 10 years ago. Now, we were never really massively intensive, but we did change how we farmed, and I think I was gung-ho. I said, we're doing this is it. My husband was a little bit more sceptical about it. Even with that, it took us maybe 5 years off that to settle into the pattern. So I'm thinking if that took us 5 years for a lot of people to change, and it's not just about organic farming, it's about changing your farming practices. I think, you know, that's a challenge in itself for farmers that, you know, we're making these requests and demands, if you like, that they change how they farm. That's a huge mindset change. So I suppose whatever we can do to make that easier for them, and look, financial supports are one way of helping that, but you need to get your mind around it. But I suppose thinking about the week and what we've had and what we've seen, we've certainly seen, we've certainly seen changes on our farm because we farm it differently, and I would like to think our soil has certainly improved its quality, and how we judge it, and look, we get it tested and all of those things, but they're all very sort of abstract in a way. We know that it went through a phase of when it was being farmed non-organically to organically, it certainly the growth rate dropped off for 2 or 3 years, and that's the big scary point. But now we can, with absolute assertion, say that it probably grows more grass now than it did before we were organic. So, and we're not putting the inputs in. So something magical is happening there under the ground that is allowing that to happen. And I can't give you the figures or tell you what the biology is, but there is something certainly, and people don't believe that when you tell them, but it is. Yeah, so yes, it's productive. So from a farm's perspective, it's productive, but certainly wider than that, because we manage things we're quite hands off in a way because we're too busy, and that's important as well. So we value our time, but certainly over the years we've seen. I mean, even last year, and I see Una there from Birdwatch Ireland. I mean, we saw a juvenile owl on our farm. We'd never seen one before. Now, I know there are owls on farms across Ireland, but we had never had one before. So that was a step for us. That was, oh my God, we've seen an owl. And, there's few indications maybe this year that maybe hopefully the breeding pair have stayed. That was like a big wow moment for us because we were just really tuned in for those sorts of things. But certainly we can see a bit of diversity in our hedges, and it's very simplistic top level, but we are very much more in tune with our farm. And I think because we made that change to farm in a different way, it made it more exciting for us. And when you're tuned in, you love what you do. And I think that's you were speaking about love. I think we do have a love for our farm and our land, and that privilege to be able to manage it. Now, we're not perfect and there's lots more to do, but I think, if you can get that in people, then that's a big step to make.
A lot of my own work has been exploring what I call eco-shame or nature shame, the way we've been shamed away from nature. So in the 1800s, anthropologists decreed that the further a society removes itself from nature, the more civilized it becomes. For several centuries, there's been a very purposeful societal disconnection from nature in order to assert our human superiority, and even the superiority of one nation over another. And that's led to a lot of insidious shaming around the ways we relate to nature. So I wanted to ask you about the presence of nature shame in both farming and in government. In Home Tree's summer school booklet, I quoted from your blog, very cheekily, where you say that you constantly highlight the Irish farmers who are embracing a role in climate action and in building resilience. Change is happening at a grassroots level. I believe it has been happening quietly for many years, but now farmers are able to talk openly about it. I'm interested in that phrase, but now farmers are able to talk openly about it. Why couldn't they before? And are there similar limits within government which prevent our public representatives from talking openly about change?
I think people, and farmers in particular, because we've come from this whole economic drive for agriculture, and it's the perception of a farmer, and there's a proudness there. I'm a productive farmer, I have X number of cows, I produce X amount of meat or milk or crops. It's a competition, essentially, and if you can, I'm being very slightly facetious about it, but it is. It's I'm a productive farmer. There's a competitiveness in people, and I think that would be my fear generally across the board. Besides farmers, I think people are naturally competitive. They want to be bigger and better at things, and I think that's no different in agriculture. But I think there are cohorts of farmers out there who have realised that this, A, maybe they just don't like it, they don't like to farm like this, or B, that they understand that they can see maybe the damage in their generation or from their parents' generation, or things have dropped off their farms and they no longer see things like, I even remember growing up and we weren't farmers, but you'd see lots of sticklebacks in the rivers and dragonflies, great big dragonflies. Like things I like out of my wildest dreams as a child to see, but they're gone. Loads of primroses, things that up my lane when I was a kid, I know are not there anymore. And that's it's entirely human intervention has made those go away. I think what I was trying to get at is to focus on the local, because I don't think people can, on the whole, can relate to climate change. We see the outrage on Twitter, for example, if a big chunk of the ice cap falls into the sea. People can't relate to that, so they don't relate to it. But they can relate to something very local in their own area. So if it's a water quality issue, that's very, oh my goodness, I have to boil my tap water now. That's tangible and relatable. So I think bring it right back down to the ground, and farmers see that on their own farms as well, a little bit like we have. So if we can get those like-minded farmers engaging together, and I think that's where the strength is. I've just come from the INA EIP, And, you know, there's 14 farmers all working together for a common good, and they're engaged with it. And I think that model is how to get that engagement and to be involved in the solution.
Can I just comment on that? And I just wanted to row in on that. And you know, when you talk about farmers having the confidence or feeling comfortable or able to talk about it, it's because of the likes of the EIPs, and they're gaining confidence by being in groups together. And that prior to this, it was about, you know, how big is your cow or how big is your bullock, you know, so it was more like who's looking in across the field at you. But now they're actually, you know, and the likes of Home Tree are doing it as well, where you're bringing farmers together. And so rather than just purely productivity, there's a confidence there to be able to talk about the values for nature and the benefits that are coming through in the work together. And I think that's a safe space, you know, and Alan alluded a lot to that sort of, you know, the other values that we have, you know, being able to communicate beyond the economic values. And I think that's really where it's coming from, building the communities with the farmers and allowing them to soften the obstacles of communication. So sorry,
I'm just going to finish very quickly. And it wasn't meant to be a criticism of farmers, because that's just the world we live in. We live in that, you know, economic world, and that's what we were told to do.
Absolutely, and I think we're all just trying to look at solutions. And when I hear you both, I'm aware, okay, there's a space there for a solution around communication and assisting with that process. It's not just around grants, it's around the social ethic within farming. And I don't know what the solution is. I know Home Tree would be helping with all of that, but it's possibly personal. Mary, do you want to say something? I'm coming to you now, so fire away.
No, I just want to say that myself and Maureen actually went to UCD and did a degree in agriculture. We went off in different angles of it. But what really struck me was that agriculture was basically chemicals. That's what you learned, is how to kill things while producing this one narrow band of something, just to make as much money as possible. And I think if you don't integrate, you know, it's so disconnected from the reality of we're completely dependent upon the web of life for our own survival, let alone the survival of everything else. You know, so this lack of weaving of that knowledge through the education of these people they are the guardians of most of our land, and it's never mentioned. And it shouldn't be given as an option in schools or colleges. They should be taught from that level that if we don't look after everything, there is nothing. And there's that Japanese saying that, you know, the end is actually just the beginning, and we're coming to the end. And that's why all of us are here, is because we know we need a new beginning. And like Alan said, that beginning is heart-based, and that's the only option, really.
Great. Absolutely, I couldn't imagine. You know, there's nothing more key than education, and I hope that the Minister will go back to the Minister for Education and tell them what
I
the
want
people
to
of
leave
Clare
my
think.
minister hat at the door.
Oh yeah, Pippa, please go back to the Minister of Education, who is wearing a very four-cornered hat, and tell the Minister that we want Mary Reynolds.
Oh God, no! Don't want me there. No.
Mary, I have a Chinese quote for your Japanese quote. Know the masculine, but keep to the feminine. Be humble toward the world. And I have a second quote which comes from the eco-feminist Greta Garrett, who says, Western intellectual tradition has resulted in devaluing whatever is associated with women, emotion, animals, nature, and the body, while simultaneously elevating in value those things associated with men, reason, humans, culture, and the mind. Do you see our environmental crisis as having roots in the devaluing of feminine living patriarchy, in women's voices, and women's values, and women's wisdom, not truly being listened to.
Can you make this go down a bit because I'm straining my neck? Thank you. Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. The earth is the embodiment of the feminine, and it's everything we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. And so, you know, the way we interact with the land has become a direct reflection of how we interact with the feminine energies in human form as well. You know, we treat our own little patches of the planet in the same way. Like I see my daughter, who I adore, and I brought up, you know, with particular ideals, but like her heroes are bloody Kardashians, and I'm kind of going, where the fuck did I go wrong? Like, you know, and it's because it's coming from all angles. Like she's being infiltrated with this crazy idea of what a woman should be, and they should never age, same way like our gardens, they shouldn't age, they should always look a particular way, completely controlled, you know, covered in chemicals, and not look at all natural. And so true nature is not, you know, is not honoured, and our women's true nature is not honoured, and as a result men's true nature is not honoured, because men are supposed to be the protectors and the supporters of the creative energy, which is the feminine energy. And instead it's become all about control and sadly abuse, and we abuse our own patches of land a lot of the time unconsciously. You know, we're unconsciously doing what you see on the telly or whatever, you know. And it's a great place to start to heal that, is to take your own patch and allow it to become its true nature. And that does mirror a healing within yourself. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but thank you.
That's absolutely great.
So, Mary, the poet Wendell Berry tells us there are no sacred places, and unsacred places, only sacred places and desecrated places. One of the key issues that I think we face is that for several thousand years, nature hasn't been allowed to be viewed as sacred or divine. Would you have any hope that as a culture we can re-sacralize nature?
The question was, is there any hope that we can re-sacralize nature? Because, as Wendell Berry said, there's no unsacred places. There's only sacred places and desecrated places, and I totally agree. Every patch of ground is sacred ground, and the way you know, the way, like we've forgotten kind of the simple kind of. There's this whole magic layer to the world that we've just cut ourselves off from. You know, there's this energy and understanding and connection with nature that we've completely just destroyed. Or there's loads of reasons for that. You know, it goes from, you know, starts with agriculture, you know, and then keeps going. And the industrial revolution was kind of the final nail in the coffin. No, actually, the green revolution was the final nail in the coffin. Let's be honest. But it's very easy to find a relationship with land again, and to instill, just like Alan said, to love it, and to pour your love and guardianship into land. It responds so quickly in the same way that a child does, or a pet. Pieces of land will respond to that love, and they become sacred. And then, you know, that fixes you while you're at it, you know. So if you don't want to go to counselling, just fix your land and you're suddenly perfect.
Is it okay to feel scared at this moment? Sorry, I'm just saying.
Catherine, I'm going to paraphrase my question because I'm just slightly aware that we don't have so much time. I know you work with Nature Capital, the valuing, the economic and social valuing of nature, and I'm wondering, as a poet, Are you frustrated or thwarted by language? So we're using terminology like nature capital or amenity, or even Minister for Land Use. I think these terms, as a poet, as a person who's sees a lot of soul within nature, how was your own relationship with language within this area of nature capital?
Okay, an easy one. So, so when we, so through my life of working with nature and with microphones, I suppose it has always been finding the right language. And what I've found, and I've said this a few times this week, because I've moved, this week I've moved from all around Mayo, the coast, working on this Lifelong Macquarie project, going around from farmers to community groups, to EU officials, to policy people, to Pippa, my friend here, not the minister, but I've been meeting ministers and Taoiseachs in the last couple of weeks. Language is really important, but we don't all speak the same language. And so I think that there is an onus, it's like travelling the world and going into a new country and showing the respect of, and showing that you can understand or you can communicate with people. So when I was, so I grew up on a farm, so I know the language of the earth, and I know the language of the land and working, and I know that deep love that Alan has described, and I think that everyone in this room feels for nature. But then I went to work with a business and a company who had been working for so long to drain peatlands, so with a company called Borden. And I was lost, a little soul in the wilderness, trying to communicate the values of nature and the values of restoring wildlife and lapwing and spread grouse. And, she was the one with the, they had this sort of derogatory term. You're just interested in the rabbits. And of course, I didn't have they just didn't understand the rabbits again were an introduced species as well. So they just totally had got me the whole wrong way. And then sometimes they'd say, you're the one who's interested in horticulture. And I was, sake lads, come on, you're not. So they didn't get my language. So back in 2011 and 12, a few of us who were deeply invested in trying to get nature on the agenda of businesses and the people in corporates, people like Jane Stout in Trinity, Declan Little, who was the head of Woodlands of Ireland, and Paddy Woodward, a journalist who was just deeply involved in restoration, as I have been through my career. And we decided, right, let's go for it and establish this forum on natural capital. And it was about trying to, all of those things that Mary described much more eloquently and what resonated more with people in this room, that nature underpins everything. So if we look in the formalised manner of the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN work, nature is it's there. The marine system, the freshwater system, the terrestrial system, and then within that is the society. And within the society is an economy of which we sort of, trade different things, and we have this, we used to trade tulip bulbs, we used to trade salt, now it's this thing of, Visa debit, that's what we're trading in at the moment. So it's trying to find the language is there, but there's different languages, and it's trying to break into this particular almost like a subspecies that speaks this certain language. So having that word natural capital, I swear to God, it'll follow me to my grave, because everyone is like capital and capitalism and all this, and we wrote a paper on this just last year myself and Paddy Woodward have been debating why is everyone so against capital, when even Karl Marx, who wrote Das Kapital, recognised that capital, it underpins everything. But it's just that it has, become, and I'm quite happy to discuss this with anyone here, so I know you're all dagger in there, but it's that underpins everything, and we must have a healthy stock of capital, of nature, that we can actually survive here, that we can have a society, we can have those relationships, and then the economy sits within it. So, yes, language is interesting, and someone said recently, do you speak farmer? So that's another language, so that's the language I've been able to go out to, so this week I've been out with farmers and been able to have the chat about the GAA and, all that sort of stuff, and how's cattle, and, so there's different languages, and we just have to recognise that it's from business, or I'm sure Marina has it with the foresters, and, I did the Native Woodland Scheme course back 20 years ago, and there was foresters there, and it was a really brilliant initiative because it was the first time I met a forester, and the forester was looking into childhood woodland, and I was seeing, the structural elements of the vegetation, the ground floor, the shrub layer, and he just saw that fine trunk, and I could, what he could get for this, and he saw the world in a different way, but he was also starting to look beyond, and he had an appetite, he wanted to be able to communicate, all these other values around, like the bluebells or the anemones, or, the squirrel, the red squirrel. So the more we talk together, and the more we listen together, we don't just kind of say, oh, well, I know what they're going to say. You talk, you share personal experiences, then you build the relationships, you build love for each other. And that's critical. It absolutely underpins everything, that sort of, sense of respecting their values, and hopefully aligning value systems. And I think I've probably spoken more than you want me to, so we'll move on to Rita.
Thank you very much.
I was just going to jump in, I'm sorry, about just the language of farmers, because terms like rewetting, rewilding strike fear into most farmers. I'm serious. It should be terms like restoration, rejuvenating. I mean, we seriously have to think about regenerating, because who wants to be rewetting their farm when they could be rejuvenating it or restoration?
So we could do with a conversation where we converse about language, and we find a helpful language for everybody.
Without being patronising, but that's the way.
Yeah, well, my colleague Barry O'Loughlin is here, and David Fallon will be joining us on the walk tomorrow, where we talk about that there's more than just trees, home tree, but there's wetlands and there's coastal systems and everything. And one of the words in the company that the company started to use was flooding. And flooding is a dreadful word. It means like you're flooded out of it, and the farm is gone and all this. So I sort of started to talk about, we need the land to be just spongy. Not flooded, but to find the words that was comfortable and could just sort of live with.
So we're seeing some of the complications that are here, and some of the many ways we could be working to address the bigger issues of biodiversity by addressing communication, language, spirituality, many other things. Marina, I am so sorry we've come so late. I'm only going to give you the tiniest window. When I was thinking about today and the complications of spruce forestry and so forth, I don't really want to go too deep into it because it's huge. But I was thinking of 100 years ago, when the state was founded. Yeats was part of the coin committee that put the sow, the woodcock, the deer, the sowan on the back of the coins, back of the Irish coins. And we lost those coins when we went to the euro. And I'm just thinking, do you have any kind of vision of how farmers can continue to earn a living and honour biodiversity? What is your vision for that?
Gosh, that's quite a A big question. Yeah, no pressure with that one. Well, I think it's important to say that, I suppose first and foremost, a lot of farmers do honour biodiversity, and we've had a lot of measures, and I'm not an agriculturalist, by the way, I'm a forester, so my background is forestry. But I think a huge amount of agricultural programmes over the last 20, 30 years, I feel in a lot of ways has taken away the skills from farming, from farmers, because they've really, sometimes the terms and conditions of different schemes are more important than actually what they're doing. When, I suppose, just so I don't want to go off track here, but just to understand the question correctly, are you asking me that how do we connect farmers back with biodiversity through trees or through farming in general? Or
I just think in general, I feel like you have a very good knowledge of both the problems and the needs of farmers, and I just imagine that intuitively you have a sense of where this needs to go.
Well, I do with regard to forestry, I suppose, about all their knowledge and their skills around that. And, I suppose 100 years ago, at the turn of the century, we'd only 1% forest cover. We lost all our tradition and skills around forestry. And you mentioned earlier about education being so important, and it is so hugely important, because why we were set up a co-op was to empower and encourage farmers to plant their own land, because it was something that they were very, they didn't know how to do it or how to approach it, and the whole cooperative ethos was all about that extension to bring them together and to educate them, and we brought them together in groups so that they could plant together in groups. At the time, a huge amount of the focus was on Sitka spruce because it was the economics of it. It was about making the farm as productive as possible. With regard to forests, we really need as a country more farmers planting trees. That's our big ambition, I think, for the future and moving forward. And we have really disengaged them at the moment. We've disengaged them, unfortunately, because we've made something so important really complex and really difficult. And they can't get their heads around it. Most of us can't get our heads around it ourselves, how complicated it has become. And we need them planting so many types of forests out there. They're already, and in my experience, farmers are the ones that will plant so many different types of forests, and they will, they can be incorporated into their overall farm mix, to their riparian woodlands. They need commercial woodlands where they produce wood. We also need, they'll have broadleaf woodlands, mixtures for landscape, for shelter, for wildlife corridors. There's so many different parts of it, but we really have to bring them with us. We really have to show them, we talk about the economics of this. At the end of the day, a farmer has to make a living, and some of the measures that we have out there with regard to planting forests that are more where it's where wood production is a tertiary function, where it's really about biodiversity, we need to reward them, I suppose, properly for that public good, because at the end of the day, it is a public good. We wanted to enhance the overall locality and the overall farm. So I hope that kind of...
That's a terrific answer, thank you so much. And Pippa, I would invite you to go back to government and please tell them that the farmers need support in supporting biodiversity. So I can't thank you all enough. I'm so sorry that we ran out of time. I apologise to everybody for the discomfort, and thanks so much for your forbearance and staying with us. I hope you'll come back next year and we'll do this again.